Welcome to the Bad Boss Brief, a strategic guide on how to not be an asshole at work. We'll tell you about bad bosses, how they can be handled, how to tell if you happen to be one. An executive and an executive coach, both artists working in advertising and marketing for more than 2 decades, are here to advise you on the ins and outs of office environments. The Bad Boss Brief is your ultimate guide to navigating any employment landscape. Without any further ado, here are your hosts, Eugene S. Robinson and Stephanie Peirolo.
I'm Stephanie Peirolo. This is Bad Boss Brief. Welcome. And
Eugene S. Robinson. And if you guys only knew what we went through.
waiting up until the last possible moment. Right. So today we're going to talk about the turnaround boss, also known as the assassin. But before we start that, I want to do just a quick what we did with our weekends. Eugene, you were doing some movie. What was going on for you this weekend?
Oh, I it seems like I'm vice president of the Asperger's Association. So it seems like I got contacted by a guy who is obsessed with this movie called Game of Death, which was Bruce Lee's last movie. But not just the entire movie, but specifically the 17 or 18 minutes that Bruce Lee is actually in the movie. And he has contacted the Bruce Lee estate, the foundation, the family, and got the okay from them, as well as the film company, to do a redux. And he did this fairly phenomenal redux. So in like liner notes, in the spirit of liner notes or direct cut, he is doing interviews with everybody who's still alive who was in the movie, as well as media pundits who were, have had their worldview heavily heavily affected by Bruce Lee, which, strangely enough, I count myself as one. So he flew out from New York with his film crew in West Hollywood, nice studio set up, and asked me 30 questions about Carl Jung, ego, death, and Bruce Lee. So, and we couldn't have any windows open in the room because of the noise, and you couldn't have the air conditioning on. So it was really like a baton death march for me to make it to the 30th question. But I was game. I knew, like John Henry, I could outlast him, and I think I did.
That's exciting. Well, and I do want to try. I mean, both you and I have other projects that we do outside of this podcast. And so I think it's a good idea to just, kind of talk about some of them sometime. When will the movie be ready? Do you know?
I don't know when it's going to be ready, but what was interesting, because they took me to dinner afterward, is to hear about how, just to kind of get back in the mind frame of in the 1970s, where, Bruce Lee was not an icon yet and was still having to deal with concerns about, is America ready for Asian people in movies? It was fairly, stunning stuff, and indeed the casting for the movie, Hugh O'Brien, Gig Young, a lot of Dean Jagger, a lot of very famous Anglo actors were in it. But it was like, when you try to figure out why they were in it, you can't, outside of them, Hollywood thinking, well, we got to put some white faces in it to appeal to people, not realizing how huge of a star Bruce Lee was. So just to hear them talk about old Hollywood stuff is fairly phenomenal. So
that's interesting. Well, today we're going to talk about the turnaround boss, or the assassin. And the reason that we decided to do this one, the kind of rip from the headlines story, is Bob Iger came back to Disney in November. So do you want to give the quick kind of like what he did before and why he's back, or do you want me to do it?
Well, we could both do it. You give the straight version, and then I'll give the conspiracy version.
All right. The straight version is that Iger was at Disney for many years. I think it was like 14 years. He left. They had a whole succession plan, and he handpicked the guy that was going to follow after him. And 2 years later, he's back with a vengeance. Since he came back in November of last year, he has done 2 things that he's getting a lot of press for. The first one was to require everyone to be in the office 4 days a week, saying that it's a mandate for creative people to all be breathing the same air at the same time in order to be creative, which we can discuss later because I don't believe that. And he announced that he's laying off 7,000 people. In 3 rounds
only 7,000?
Only 7,000.
Yeah, this is phenomenal. The conspiracy version is that they never intended to give the other dude a chance. That this was and I'm sure he's thinking that as well. That this was a plot. I mean, if Iger was really retired, this wouldn't have lured him out of retirement. Yeah, and I my heart actually goes out to the guy who probably for 2 years there were missteps, but I'm sure given Iger's tenure that he had missteps too. But it's interesting for me to watch the whole Cain Abel thing play out in real time in a corporate sense. Where I mean that was one of the things that most mystified me about the Cain Abel story until I realized that my concerns were not the reason the story existed. Like why was God suddenly so anti-Cain? There was never a reason given why he was rejecting Cain's offerings that I read. I mean, maybe I should reread the Bible. So I think this is like arbitrary, except for the fact that I think also the scuttlebutt that I get being here in the Valley is that Iger was bought back specifically to position the company for sale. And that is and the rumor is that Apple would be purchasing it, which I hope to heaven that does not happen. As an Apple stockholder, full disclosure, I think that's a bridge too far for Apple. But in any case, that's what I'm hearing here in the Valley.
Well, and what it was interesting is it reminded me, like, we talk about these different bosses, and some of them I've had experiences with, some of them I haven't. But I have a real pivotal turnaround boss story. It was in the 90s. I was kind of like earlier in my career, but sort of mid-career. And I went to work for a startup, and I'm not going to say the name because I do have, this is one of the places where I have those NDAs.
NDAs, which now are NLRB blew him out of the water.
Theoretically, however, not to, cause my lawyer to blanch should she hear this. So startup in Seattle was the founder of the startup had already done one startup that was phenomenally successful that sold for pots of money. And he had a fantastic reputation. And he built software and a platform where you could watch video and talk to other people and chat, which in the 90s was new and special.
Yep.
And so I had been hired in a sales role because the first idea that he had was this is going to be like online radio, but nobody wanted to chat listening to online radio. So they shut down the online radio, and I said, you know what? I think that I could sell this software. And the idea was that this software and platform was going to compete with WebEx, which had just started at the time. And it was going to be like we use Zoom now. It was going to be a business conferencing. And I said, I think I can sell this to entertainment companies. And the founder, who was a really smart guy, said, well, what do you need? And I'm like, I need those two guys. Right? So one guy was senior. He was my boss. And then there was a younger guy. And we went to New York. And my boss had been in the music industry for a long time. He knew a ton of people. And we made incredible gains. And we got to the place where a major media company that you would instantly recognize was going to use our software as one of the foundational elements of their digital platform. Right. I mean, if you watch Succession, it was that level of kind of Succession TV show deal. So because they had shut down the online radio station, they brought in a turnaround boss. And he did not have experience in startups. He did not have experience with, like digital media. But he came in and he was going to fix everything. And honestly, I just kind of ignored him. I was almost ready to sign the deal with the huge media company. And I figured, he knows how to run a business. He's the CEO. He's going to want me to do this deal because it's going to change the company. Right?
Yep.
And he fired me. And it was this real sort of like loss of innocence moment because I just thought like we are responsible for this deal that's going to turn the company around. Why would he do that?
Yep.
Well, what I didn't realize at the time, but now understand looking back in retrospect, the president that came in was a white guy. He brought in as, advisors and henchmen, other white guys that he had worked with at McKinsey and, that particular type of person. Yep. My boss was a black man and I was a woman, the one of only two women that worked in sales at the company. They couldn't stand that we were being successful.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they had to spit us out. It was insupportable. Now, I don't think the company was around. Maybe it lasted 2 years more,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I realized, and it was one of those things where I literally couldn't get my head around it.
Mm-hmm.
I had that sort of the salesman hubris. Hey, if I'm making money, if I'm making my numbers, I'm golden.
Right.
And it didn't occur to me that the sexism and racism would be so marked in this man that
Yeah.
he would do something that damaged the future of the company just to not have to expand his understanding.
Yep.
And I think
Yep.
I think what's key about that is that, when what I was thinking about with this episode is that, like, what I would say to someone who has a takeover boss come into their organization is, don't learn from my naivete. Disabuse yourself of the notion that this person has the best interests of the company or the employees as any kind of priority for them.
Yep. Well, it's like it's to me, it's like real life. It's like, because you come in and there's a hoo-ha about we're family and all that kind of crap. Just because this person, they are still fundamentally unknown to you, and there's also the possibility that they shit canned, excuse my French, shit canned your involvement, because they figured, well, if they could do it, it's got to be easy. We could just pick up where they took off, which, when the deals fall through, they go, well, we were wrong, and they go on with business. But it's fairly phenomenal. It's, when we're talking about the health of their businesses and their livelihoods, their professions, that they would be so. Listen, there was a company in San Francisco that was, again, I'll keep the name out of my mouth, but they wanted to pull off a deal with a company that I was well respected at, that I had been at, right? Apple. They were very close. I knew people at Apple, was going to set them up with this deal. Friday, I was told that Monday, I would come in, they would badge me, I'd have my desk, I would start working. As I'm finishing up, what was like new employee orientation, they said, "Oh, we'd like you to meet the CEO." And so I meet the CEO and I look at his face and I thought, I will never work here. And as it was, Monday morning, as I'm getting ready to go to my new job, they called me and they said, "Your desk is not ready yet." And I go, "Oh, okay. So do you want me to come and sit?" She goes, "We'll call you back."
So what was it? What was it that you saw in his face?
Listen, this is in advance of the internet. Now I could say, okay, somebody types my name in the internet and they see articles about Oxbow, and then they say, we don't want a guy here who's on stage in his underwear. That, forget about the fact that I've been at Intel, Apple, Adobe, Nikon. That doesn't matter. What I saw in his face was like, it was kind of like that Trump moment where he walked by his accounting department and saw that his head of accounting was a black guy. And this guy had been killing it. He just saw a name on a piece of paper, didn't know the guy was actually black, goes back to his chief of staff. He goes, "Get rid of that guy and get me a Jew accountant." That's like a quote, and that's what they did. Didn't make sense to him. He couldn't make sense of it, so therefore he wasn't going to make sense of it. And I suspect that this company that is now out of business, the woman who was the head of HR, who is my champion, really wanted me in there, virtually kind of apologized to me. Well,
and this same guy,
Yep.
in the turnaround CEO.
Yep.
When I flew to New York to finish up the deal, and he sent one of his McKinsey henchmen with me, who was actually a decent guy, right? And we met. I took the henchman to meet my client, and the guy's name's Tom. Tom, the henchman, gets on the phone with the CEO. I can hear him. I'm standing right next to him, and the CEO says, "Is she having sex with him? Is she sleeping with him?" Meaning the client. The only way he can conceive of me doing this level of a deal was to be having sex with.
My God.
And Tom just looked at me. And I mean, he was a decent human being. He just looked at me and he was like, he knew I heard.
Yep.
We're standing like, 6 inches away from each other. And he said, no.
Yep.
No.
Yep.
And it was like he literally couldn't understand a woman having a sales relationship. And what ended up happening is they did that. They thought, well, if Stephanie can do it, we can do it. And they brought the signed contract to my client.
Yep.
And my client said, "Where's Stephanie?" And they're like, "She doesn't work here anymore." And he's like, "My deal was with Stephanie. I
Yep.
don't know you. Go
Yep.
away."
Nice.
Right?
Nice.
I'm
Nice.
still
Nice
in
to see
touch
the
with
system
him.
work. Yeah.
Yes, because
That's
he's a
great.
wonderful
That's great.
person. But
Right.
what I think is interesting is that, if you are in this kind of a situation, if you're low down, like I
Mm-hmm.
was,
Mm-hmm.
get ready, right?
Yep. Yep.
Disabuse yourself that you need to have the professional equivalent of a go bag.
Yeah.
You need to have your resume ready. You need to be keeping your network, up to speed, getting in touch with people. And you need to have whatever it is that you need to download from that
Mm-hmm.
workplace, your emails,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, on a drive and ready to go. And you need to be that ready to be laid off if you're lower down on the food chain.
Even more than that, I remember this great thing that Mae West said, which was keep a diary. One day it'll keep you, or to quote the beleaguered Alec Baldwin, always be closing. I never stop looking for a job. Even when I have a job that I really like, I figure if something better comes along, that's great. If not, then whatever. I'll stay where I am. Even if I'm happy, I'll keep looking because it's in my mind part of developing a professional muscle. Just things change. What people want changes. How they approach filling their jobs. I mean, a lot of the jobs that are editorial jobs in-house in corporations now, they're calling something else. They didn't 5, 10 years ago. They called them editorial jobs. They call them something else. Strategy, content. These are words that mean the same thing. But if you want to run in there with your resume with no cover letter with just editorial on it, you're not going to get any response. So it pays. Or what was it, the great line from I Claudius? My advice to you is this, Claudius: trust no one. I mean, yeah, it sounds overly paranoid, but in actual fact, what undergirds it all is this idea that no matter what they say, no matter what they do, unless you work at Patagonia, the people that you work for probably don't care that much about you, which is fine. I mean, how much do I care about my gardener? I like my gardener, but if we had to make budgetary cuts, I wouldn't have no problem at all telling my gardener, look, I don't need to see you until the fall. Sorry, that's the way it
Well,
is.
and I think this is the challenge. A lot of us work with people who we like. We
Hmm.
like the people we work with most of the
Hmm.
time or some of the
Hmm.
time, depending on how
Hmm.
lucky we are. And, as human beings, we are hardwired to be in community.
Yep.
And the fact that bowling leagues are no longer fashionable or people don't, go to church socials or whatever, it doesn't change our DNA. We're still hardwired to be in community. And
Hmm.
just like we make stories, we also make community. So people
Right.
go to work every day and you get used to seeing the same people, right? Joan in accounting gets pregnant and you watch her go from looking a little queasy all the way to bringing her baby back after maternity leave and you feel
Hmm.
connected. There's
Yep.
all those ways and we forget that this is not community.
Yep.
It's not even Ersatz community.
Yep.
It's still the jungle.
Yep.
And these bosses that are coming in, they're doing their job. Bob Iger is doing what he was paid to do, which is increase stockholder shareholder value.
Hmm.
That's his only job,
Yep.
right? And I think that those of us that think like I did when I was in, like in the olden days, that these leaders come in with any other agenda besides
Hmm.
increasing shareholder value, then we're mistaken. And I think that's
Yep.
the idea, is to recognize we may have this communal feeling. We
Yep.
may feel like these people are our neighbors or our friends, even a couple ladders up,
Yep.
but we have to remember to have our professional go bag packed.
And there's no social sanction for Bob Iger. There is no social. It was weird. If I flew into for this film stuff I did this weekend, I flew into Burbank, and as I'm walking through the Burbank airport to catch the car to the site, uh, I look up and there's a Jay Leno poster. Jay, even after the burns and all that stuff, and I was like, what a difference a few years makes. Because it may be indiscernible to people that are not specifically connected to the comedy community, but that whole his Bob Igering of his position vis-a-vis the Tonight Show versus David Letterman put him on the outs with the entire, their comics are clannish. And nobody is claiming Leno at this point. He did a Bob Iger. He he was a great professional operator. He saw opportunity, embraced opportunity, to hell with the torpedoes, end or friendships. It's all fair in love and war. Got the job, got the gig, did it for many years. And now he's doing Vegas. And it just, but there, in terms of his connections to the comedy community, zero. Nobody's referencing him. Nobody's rocking him. He doesn't have any TV shows in development like all these things that Letterman is doing on Netflix. They have voted, but there's no social sanction for a guy like Bob Iger. Bob Iger will lay off 7,000 people, in Los Angeles, and he'll be the king of Los Angeles because there's the community of people that he might have to answer to. They care about one thing and one thing only, and that was why they brought him back. The question is, the guy who they had there for 2 years, does he at that point become Brutus? Does he at that point, stick around long enough to enact some sort of revenge? Yes, he's got an NDA, a non-disparagement clause, all that stuff, non-compete. But how steamed is he? Maybe with a golden parachute, 20 mil, 30 mil to go home. Maybe he doesn't feel that steamed at all. But at a certain point, it's not about money with these guys. It's about reputation. So.
But this is what, the more we do this podcast and the more I look at these, the more I think that capitalism is something we need to try to get away from as quickly as we can, right? It's really about surviving. There's something fundamentally broken with the capitalist system. And then I think, well, maybe it's just because I've been working in advertising and technology too long. But I look at healthcare. I look at like doctors and nurses that I know that went into healthcare because they really felt a mission, who are being just like ground down to fine dust by the for-profit system, the system that's broken. I look at teachers and the education system. There's so many things that are fundamentally flawed about the approach we take to work that I feel like it's incumbent upon us individuals, the non-Bob Igers, to really shift how we go to work, to recognize this is not my family. I can enjoy them. This is a place that is going to throw me under the bus as quickly and swiftly and fluidly as possible when it becomes an issue of short-term financial gain for the shareholders. Because I cannot imagine that there's any long-term gain for Disney. Disney relies to some degree on creativity, and really good artists and creatives have other options. They can leave Disney and they can go somewhere else. Right. And so the people that are making those kind of genius properties that make money for Disney in perpetuity, they have other options. Why would they want to stay here rather than starting their own place or doing something else? And so I think that's one of the things that if you have the luxury of being able to choose, of being able to step out, I'm starting to think more and more like that's what people should be doing.
Yeah. Let me share an Iger-esque story with you in brief here. And I will name names in this one. I had been editor-in-chief of EQ magazine, which was owned by CMP at this point, a company called California Music Player. They published guitar player, bass player, keyboard, acoustic guitar, drum. They did a bunch of magazines, all music related. I get called into the big boss's office at one point. And I've been there, 3 years. And they say, listen, we need you we're going to have layoffs. We need you I need somebody from your team to be laid off. I go, I have the smallest team of any publication here. And we've actually won awards with this really small team. So I have my managing editor, whose mother just died. So I will not lay her off. We have my associate editor, who I just convinced to drop out of his master's program in Indiana, move to California, and do this job. So I'm not laying him off. And you have my 60-year-old creative director who just bought a house, and I'm not going to lay him off. So maybe you need to tell me how much you're trying to mitigate in order to, and they go, well, we're trying to mitigate about $2 or $3 million in losses. I go, okay, any person on my team, what they get paid. Any single person is not going to make a bit of a dent in that. Not a bit. So if it's just the same to you, I'd rather not make that call. They go, no, we're fine. This is on a Friday. Monday, they say, hey, could you come into our office? I go, yeah. Go, We're laying you off. Okay, that's fine. I just laugh. I go, good luck to you. And they continued publishing. They positioned this company for sale, and they sold to a company named Newbay. Newbay gets in there. They look at these cooked books, and they clawed back. They all got in trouble. They clawed back. The guy's name is Tony. I don't need to give his last name, but I don't want to go that far. But he got in trouble, and all the gains that they thought they were going to get as part of this sale were revealed in the spirit of due diligence was uncovered. So what I'm hoping with at least Bob Iger, if you're going to be an SOB, at least be a good SOB.
But I think
at least people could kind of shrug and go, well, I was done in by a good SOB instead of a bumbling clown. So.
But I think what's interesting is that that is skillful boss behavior, right? Yeah. That's what I think we would hope that our friends, our family members, that's how we would hope that people that we care about would act, right? We would certainly hope that our bosses would act that way. I've done similar things, but I think the idea is like you and I have been spit out of corporate America, like quite forcibly, and we are talking about it. And so it's like maybe there's a connection between those two things. The fact that you and I aren't allowed to be there anymore. We are not welcome because we no longer participate I have never participated in that value system.
Well, let me. There's of course the Hollywood twist to this story is that they go to one of the other editors in chief and they have the same discussion with him, and he picks a guy on the staff who had been with him for 8 years. They were friends. The guy, his wife was 8 months pregnant. And they go and they say, hey, Greg, sorry, you got to go. He lays off clearly one of the guys who would be qualified maybe as one of his better friends with a wife who was 8 months pregnant, lays the guy off. 6 months later, they lay him off anyway. The editor-in-chief who made this decision. So now you knifed your friend in the back and you still got done in. It's like, have you learned nothing from history? I still stand on what I did. Like I said, it would have felt better to be done in by a smart SOB instead of a bumbling one. But in the end, you can see that it plays out the same way. I went into it not trusting them. Other guy trusted them. And in 6 months, he lost a best friend and a job.
We're going to have to do a show about business karma because, you stay in the business long enough and you see those instances of business karma, right? Yeah. Like, somebody you were kind to, you didn't even remember being kind to, who remembers that kindness and vice versa. But we're almost at time. So did you ever fire me or was that?
I do.
Okay, fire me.
I do. Oh, my God. Okay, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that maybe people are not paying attention to this extent, but it seems like we are hours away from a multi-billion-dollar deal that will make Endeavor, formerly William Morris, run by Ari Emanuel, the brother of Rahm Emanuel, and the character that his fictional life was in the series Entourage, owns Endeavor, CEO of Endeavor, has now just bought WWE, which is, for those who don't know, worldwide. It used to be WWW, the Worldwide Wrestling Foundation, Vince McMahon's company. Vince McMahon had a variety of charges against him and did this whole kabuki show of resigning. I'm eating crow, my mea culpa, I'm canceled now, but he didn't go away. So multi-billion dollars. So now Ari Emanuel has two multi-billion-dollar companies, WWE and the UFC, that are run by people who have bona fide offenses against women, CEOs, and shareholders were like kind of trying to say, hey, what are you going to do about this UFC thing with the guy Dana White slapping his wife up and kicking her on the floor New Year's Eve
on video. There's video of that.
Video, as he's doing press for the Power Slap League. And what are you going to do about that? And Ari Emanuel was like, what? I didn't hear nothing about that. Okay. And then we're going to buy WWE because of the synergies involved. And Vince McMahon is up there for paying hush money to like 20 different women for, sexual improprieties. It's like Hollywood doesn't get more starkly disturbing than all of that. And so I'm like, But it's not an accident. Nobody stumbled into this. Decisions were made that were based on, I do not give a crap.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't see anything on that spreadsheet about sexually harassing women. I don't see anything on that spreadsheet about slapping my wife on video and kicking her on the floor. I don't see it. I just see numbers. So here we go.
And shareholder value is the only moral imperative.
Right. And you know, and this is when you want to talk about your woke celebrities. Oh, celebrities are so woke. Well, really? How many of those celebrities who are repped by Endeavor are taking a stand for this? Like, you know what? I'll be better off at Creative Artists. I'll be better off at UTA. They're not going to. So this is this is bad bossery of the highest order. And look, you know, I think Ari Emanuel is trying to do to Hollywood what his brother did to Chicago. No. So what can you say? His brother escaped with by the skin of his teeth, and I think Ari will probably get away with it as well. But this is bad bossing non-parial.
Yeah.
Unless you intend to get rid of these cats, which I know you don't.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll keep an eye on that. Well, we've come to time. So next time we are going to talk about the micromanaging boss.
Ooh.
That was actually a suggestion from a listener. Thank you very much. We're starting, we have enough people listening and watching that I think we should be getting more. Just to let you know, I actually got an email at WTF at Bad Boss Brief, and it was asking for career advice, and I had time, so I wrote an email back to the woman, and she found it was very helpful. So I don't know how long I'm going to be able to do that, but WTF at badbossbrief.com. You will get a response from me because I am reading it. And we also love story ideas. And thank you to the anonymous person who suggested that we do the micromanager boss. And I got some good stories as well. So
nice.
That's all we've got time for now. We'll see you next time in a couple of weeks. Thanks.
Adios.
All right. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Bad Boss Brief with your hosts, Eugene S. Robinson and Stephanie Peirolo. You can check out more of their work by visiting consigliera.substack.com for Stephanie and eugenesrobinson.substack.com for Eugene. You can also find Eugene at Mr. Sleep 3, that's the number 3, on Instagram. Send us your questions or comments to WTF@badbossbrief.com. And be sure to join us right here on your favorite podcast platform for more insights every other week. Until next time, don't be an asshole at work.